Hello. How are y'all doing? I actually can't hear you from here, so I'm just gonna read people's body language, I guess. So this is an excerpt from a story called Tomato Fruit, which I started writing 6 years ago as a sort of like proto script for one of my films. The film actually ended up being very different from this, but I've been working on this for a little while. When you moved into the upstairs unit, I prayed you would not try to steal vegetables from my garden. My squash blossoms, butternut, and horned lemons, my crown jewels, my currency, and capital. I'd trade them for favors at the shopping mall in exchange for vials of water, pure oxygen, and cures for my ailing eyesight. The sores on my feet from walking on acid dust all day. The pimples that have been burned into my neck from where the skin was exposed during the sudden summer rain. I had to wait until the next door neighbor died before I bribed the landlord to put the room on my lease so I could sew lamps into its walls and spread compost over the softening corpse of my neighbor. If you look carefully, you can still see vaguely the bowling pin of a man emerging from the soil in a gentle sloping mound. He continues to decompose, and sometimes the worms are very fervent, so his fat gets torn up into jelly chunks. His skin has become mottled with brown and black speckles, and it's obvious where he was patched with plastic. Like all of us, he has been reared on a diet of chemical ooze and protein mud, so it smells really disgusting in my garden, but at least he is soft and meaty, which means that the vegetables are nutrient dense. I think you and I became friends when I accidentally left the door to my garden apartment open, and I was slicing open my neighbor's silicone buttocks to plant carrots into. The smell was, of course, horrible, some hot, melting, rotting sock smell, like latex in heat, with a lot of bacteria pooled in its grooves. I was sweating profusely and needed to wipe the hair out of my eyes, but my hands were sticky with blood and plastic, so I had to rely on touch to guide me through my planting. I guess you were intrigued by the smell that wafted into the stairwell and let yourself into the room. "Hi," you said, sitting down and poking the inert body with a dirty finger. "Hi," I said nervously. "Sorry it smells so bad." My white work shirt was stained orange with my sweat and all the fluids juicing out of the body I was planting, and I was getting nervous about a trio of maggots who were scooting quickly up my leg. I swatted them away and left a salmon-colored stripe on my thigh. "It's pretty gross," you agreed. "If I help you grow some tomatoes and build a planter box for you, can we split the profits?" I hadn't seen fresh tomatoes in over 15 years and didn't know anyone who knew where to get tomato seeds, so I didn't believe you. "Where did you get them?" I asked. "They're not real tomatoes, are they?" "Of course not," you said. "It's just a convincing blend. Part pluot, part tilapia, part lemon, part olive, and a bunch of bug and fungal parts. Low odor." You rooted around a small pack tied around your waist and handed me a small red heart fruit that was still pulsating. I sniffed it cautiously. There was barely any smell, mostly a faint honey fragrance. You nodded, and I bit into it. It was delicious, succulent, and I let the juice sluice down my throat. I'd never had an actual tomato before, so I didn't know how convincing the flavor was. But I doubted any of our neighbors would know either. "Okay," I said. And the next day, you brought a corroded bathtub that still had little lion's feet on its ends. We started sleeping in it together, and after I demanded that you uphold your end of the bargain, you found a few computer husks and strung them together for a makeshift container bed. We were a good pair. I didn't trust you with the finances, so I managed our money, but you were charming and knew how to get good seeds. A few more neighbors in our building died, probably from loneliness or lung disease, and we ran pH tests on their corpses before snatching them in the dead of night. This allowed us to start growing phosphorescent varieties of corn, opal grapes, black bananas. I fell in love with you quickly. You tapped poems into my spine with your fingers while I slept, and always had breakfast waiting for me when I awoke. I was depressed from seeing so many friends give up and sell their bodies as testers, while the well-connected ones got desk jobs as apprentice subscription managers for the future farms. I had a hard time waking up most days, sometimes would spend dawn to dusk as inert as old bathwater. But you didn't seem to mind. You never cast judgment upon my sadness, let my grief ooze into you and absorbed it like stone. Your briny fish spine porridge was often the only thing that would get me out of bed to do our planting. As I began to feel better, I tried to cook for you too, even though you didn't like the meals I made and my biscuits tasted like rocks. Yet you would still eat my terrible cooking on our moldy couch, letting me fill the negative space around your cool, slim arm with my head. After we ate, I would burrow into the scoop darkness of your body, where words were not necessary, and silence an opening that required no filling. I would look at the back of your head and wonder, what does the inside of an apple seed look like? Can the moon cast a rainbow shadow? How many times can a person fall in love? And each night I dissolved, lost my shape, and crept into your ears, your harpsichord teeth, the soft purple lines of your face. As I regained my energy and began to smile again, I took on an increasing share of the gardening work. You spent more and more time down in the markets. I was often amazed, would never have been able to find guavas in the shape of abyssal fish or cucumbers that shone like the moon. But our tomato fruits were always my favorite, their sweetness unmatched, the purity of their flavor like liquid gold. We didn't eat them often. They were too valuable, but we sometimes cut one open for a special occasion, like our birthdays. Our neighbors envied us and probably would have robbed or murdered us if you hadn't charmed them into trade. We managed like this for several months. I was careful not to demand anything of you, as I had the feeling you would never return if I did. And I relied on you for the way your fingers and tongue entered my flesh and the magic that you summoned from our garden. You were very affectionate, calling me names that made my skin glow. Sweetgrass, cornflower, little tomato. I started to feel awake in the mornings again, and even my dreams began to come back to me, if only in snatches, flashes of nightingale song. At some point, I began to notice that you were getting tired more easily. You started to sleep in more, as if my old misery had infected you, finally broke through your protective membrane. We assumed that your anemia was from a lack of protein, so we traded our black banana tree for a tub of two-headed shrimp. They tasted watery and bitter, and I realized that we'd been tricked. Not shrimp at all, but plastic bags sewn together with intestinal strings, floating along a battery-powered current. I was too nervous to trade for any more protein, and you became weaker and weaker, then erratic. You began talking to yourself, easily moved to incoherent anger. You continued to be gentle with me, but I saw your majestic black hair falling out in clumps, and the metal ring in your neck beginning to green with rust. I became afraid. You were still feral, but I didn't know what it meant to be in love with you anymore. It was you who left first, you who tried to sleep in the rail station sewn into a sack of old computer parts headed for the recycling plant. For a free reboot via osmosis, you claimed. You had been talking about it for months, even though I told you it was a bad idea. The circuits got everywhere, into your nostrils, ears, tear ducts, asshole. It was inevitable and so stupid. It rained that night, and your limbs began to crumble, your skin tinged teal like the bronze statues at the bottom of the sea. Your hands furred with metal dust, your chest stung like nettle when I touched you. You hadn't been fully human for a long time, but I felt newly nervous being around you. I realized I could not be sure how much of you was still blood and bone and grease. Real blood and bone and grease, I mean. not plasma, fiberglass, car fluid. The parts also congealed your blood and made you slow and stupid. You were instantaneously fast for a few days and quickly dulled into obsolescence. Your eyes became that glassy green like the ocean at night, your veins like jadeite. No one runs at the speed of light forever. Now a tungsten light swings above my face. Sweat pools in my collarbone, and I momentarily return to the warmth of our shared bathtub. Fur of rust, moth nests clot my mouth. A furnace roars for the ghosts. I miss you, I miss us, what we used to be. Spit greasing the elevator from you to me. Newton's law of equilibrium set in motion across the blinking grid. Your water drips into mine. I see the rhizomes of your gray-necked spore crackling the walls and ceilings, metal bedbugs burrowing through the holes. It is easier to close the eyes, my eyes, but they do not feel like mine. My body, not mine for a long time. Thank you.